Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back. I hope that you are all well. And if you are new, thanks so much for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. Today I am going to be talking about 15 fiction books that I wish my book club had read. I have been doing, different videos based on the books that my in real life book club of 10 plus years had read. And I've done fiction, nonfiction, humor, indigenous stories and reads, so as well as some tips that worked for our book club. So last year the book club ended due to just everyone's life taking different paths, and not least of which was that I had moved to Alberta. So most of the group members are retired, and although the book club was great fun and we had a lot of success and it had been going for a long time, I think it was equally as important to just acknowledge when to say this was a good thing and now we are going to do something else. So it also means that I no longer have content for this series, but there has been several times where I have read a book and thought, ooh, that would have been a really good book for our book club, mostly because it would have lent to conversation. So today I'm going to share 15 fiction books that I have read and thought my book club would have had a great conversation, great discussion about this book. So if you have a book club, these would definitely be books that I would recommend. So the first on my list is one of my all-time favorites, The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. I think my book club, we would have all enjoyed this book, and it would have been a great discussion about family dynamics, the bonds between siblings, the cyclical nature of our lives, and the decisions that we make. It also has a house as a character, which I love when that happens. So I think that there could have been, an interesting discussion even just about the house itself. Khalil by Yasmina Khadra. This is translated by John Cullen. And I read this last year for the BookTube prize. I actually think it is in one of my best books of 2022. And in this one, you are in the head of a man who is a suicide bomber. And when it comes time, his bomb does not go off. So you are in his mind as he decides what to do with himself, because he doesn't want to be seen as a coward. And then he's also hearing what his family and his friends think about the incident and the other suicide bombers. So this book is unlike anything else that I've ever read, and I think I would have loved a discussion about this one for sure. Silver Sparrow by Tayari Jones. I had the opportunity to buddy read this with Nikki from Red Dot Reads, so I'm really glad that I was able to discuss this along the way. Again, this would be a great book club read because there is potential for discussion around how the book is even structured. It's told in two parts by two different perspectives. And the story is about a man who is basically living a double life. He has two families. So there is plenty to talk about when it comes to family dynamics and his character in particular. And then the perspectives of his two daughters, could also have, I think, a lot of meat to it, since one of them actually knows he has a second family and the other daughter doesn't. So I think there's a lot here for a book club discussion. This next book I have to put on the list. It's another all-time favorite of mine, and I think it has been a book club favorite for many as well. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. I love the main character. She is quirky and interesting, and I did a buddy read with another member from my in real life book club, so I did get a taste of what that conversation would be like. In many ways this is a sad book, but it's also a book about hope and being valued. And both my friend and I loved the friendship in this book. I thought that was written very well. And then the character development, I think there's a lot to discuss around that as well. Next, I have A Fine Balance by Rohinton Mistry. This book is intense. It's such a good book. It takes place in India in the aftermath of partition, and then when the government declared a state of emergency. So that alone, I think, is a lot for discussion and conversation, but the characters in this book are really who stayed with me. You could talk about each one of them, their flaws, the decisions that they make, and how they depend on each other. It's also about survival and the decisions that they need to make in order to survive. So I think that this is another book that everyone in my book club would have really liked, or at least would have had an impact on all of us. This next book I've talked about before, Defending Jacob by William Landay. So when I read this book a few years ago now, I asked a few of my friends to please read it because I wanted to talk about it so bad. This is in many ways a courtroom drama, so if you like that, then you will enjoy this. And I especially wanted to discuss this with parents because I wanted to hear their take on the parents in this story and how they attempt to protect their son. So this is such a good book. I still think about it quite a bit. So yeah, highly recommend this. The Chaperone. This is by Laura Moriarty. This is a historical fiction novel about Louise Brooks, and Louise Brooks before she became a film star of the 1920s. So for this one, I think the discussion would have probably been largely around, the time period and the setting, so New York in the 1920s, and it would have also been about the relationship between Louise and her chaperone, and just how both women were looking to find answers to different things. And I think, my book club was all women, and I think that we could have all identified with something in the story and with these characters. Scarborough by Hernandez. I have given this book to a few people now, and when they read it, I have discussed it with them. Some of them are actually from Scarborough, which is a neighborhood in Toronto. So I know the discussions about this book can be interesting. This book has a lot of characters, mostly young people, and it is about a community of lower class people, many immigrants and minorities, and just the obstacles that they face on a daily basis. So many of the people in my book club were in education. So I think that this could have been a great book for our group especially. And then I have to include this next book because I think that it is an underrated and underappreciated gem of a book, and that is The Red Chesterfield by Wayne Arthurson. For a book that is like maybe 100-ish pages long, it's very thin, there is so much in this book. Each chapter is only a page long and it reads very quickly. There is a mystery, a quirky character, and about 1,000 red herrings. So I just think that the way this book is written is so clever. And I did get to discuss this book with my friends at Canada Reads American Style. I will link them below. And I was part of a group chat with Wayne Arthurson, so I will leave a link to that video below as well, so you can check that out. One of the things that I thought was really cool, and I love when this happens, is that in a number of scenes in the book, in the story, we all thought something different was happening. So when that happens, I think there's definitely something to talk about. Okay, up next I have Ordinary Grace by William Kent Krueger. I have loved both books that I've read by William Kent Krueger so far. I really want to read more. He writes relationships so well. And in this one, the relationship between the two brothers is just lovely. I think every character in the book has a purpose, you know, from the main characters to the neighbors to the people at the grocery store. And I love when an author does that well. I think a good discussion could be had around, you know, the writing, the story, the characters, and there's an element of mystery in this one as well. Another book that I think uses its characters well is Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. Every character in this story has a purpose. The story takes place over a few days. In some ways it's, what do they call that? A closed room or locked in room or something like that, you know, where the setting is fixed in one space. In this case, it's a maternity ward. And it also takes place during a pandemic. So there's a lot to talk about in this one about that and, you know, how women were or are treated in different roles. Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides. I am so grateful that I buddy read this with my friend and a BookTube subscriber and supporter, Sonia. This book, I feel, was ahead of its time. And I'm sure that it opened doors, you know, for the greater availability of books that we have now with LGBTQIA2S+ characters. My conversations with Sonia were very helpful for me because she helped clarify some things, and I enjoyed talking about the differences in each generation since this is a multi-generational story. For a book club, you know, the discussion would easily be around the topic of family and fitting in the story of an intersex person and how they are treated medically and then by others, their family, friends, and society. So the writing and the characters, and there's a few surprises. So there is a lot here. Up next is another favorite, The Island of Sea Women by Lisa C. I think this book is great for any book club, but again, because we were all women, I think that this would have had, or it would have resonated with all of us. There are strong female characters in this, from the two girls and their friendship to the women in the community who are highly respected because they are deep sea divers, which is very dangerous. So the book, you know, spans a great deal of time, and what the two girls who become women, we follow their lives, and all of it leads to really good conversation. Okay, I have two more. The Break by Katherena Vermette is another intense read. Intergenerational trauma through several generations of women. There's racism and healing, and that all plays a role in this. This book is a more difficult read because of its subject matter and also the way it is written, but that's also why it is such an important read. I did talk with a friend about this book when they read it, and there was, you know, definitely a lot to dig into. So if you are interested in Indigenous stories in Canada and truth and reconciliation, then I highly recommend this one. The last book that I want to recommend is Consent by Annabel Lyon. This is one of those books that I thought about a lot more after I had read it. This book has complex family dynamics for sure. It is about two sets of sisters. It's also about family responsibility and duty. It deals with intellectual disabilities, and then there's tragedy and suspense. So a lot going on in this one, and I think it's written in a great way to kind of keep you wondering. So that also means that there's a lot to talk about. So yeah, I would highly recommend this one as well. So those are 14 fiction books that I wish my own book club had read, because I think they would have inspired some really good conversations. Please let me know if you have read any of these books that I've suggested. What are your thoughts? Are there any books that you know, you have read and thought, that would have been pretty good. That would have been good for a book club, or that you've really wanted to discuss with someone after you've read it. What would you add to this list? I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.